military facilities, its largest military hospital. By 2:27 a.m., the sky was full of fire. Explosions shook the ground. Alarms screamed. The hospital was in flames. What happened next would shake the Kremlin, and the answer would come fast, hard, and unexpected. Stay with me till the end of this video. You will see how this single strike changed the war. Like this video, subscribe, and press the bell icon so you never miss a breakdown like this. The war between Ukraine and Russia has entered its third year. What began in February 2022 as a full-scale invasion has turned into one of the most intense conflicts in modern history. Both sides have learned, adapted, and changed tactics. Each new strike is not just about territory. It is about sending a message to the enemy, to the world, and to their own people. Russia's military hospitals are more than places to treat the wounded. They are key parts of the war machine. These facilities treat injured soldiers, yes, but they also serve as staging grounds. They are centers where medical officers coordinate troop rotations, where logistics teams plan supply routes, and where intelligence officers gather data from the front lines. Destroying such a hospital is not only about removing medical capacity, it is about striking at the nerve center of operations. This is why the hospital that was attacked was so important. Located deep inside Russian-held territory, it was one of the largest in the region. Reports suggest that it could handle thousands of patients at a time. It had multiple wings, underground storage facilities, and advanced communications systems. Some analysts believe it was also used as a temporary command post for senior Russian officers. Ukraine has spent months building its drone warfare program. At the start of the war, it relied mostly on commercial drones, quadcopters bought online, modified to drop small grenades. Those drones were effective in ambushes and in targeting Russian tanks, but they were limited. By 2023, Ukraine began producing its own long-range kamikaze drones. These could fly hundreds of kilometers and strike targets deep inside Russia. They were cheap compared to cruise missiles. They were hard to detect and even harder to shoot down. Russia knew this. Over the past year, it strengthened its air defenses. It deployed Panzer S-1 systems, mobile anti-aircraft guns, and missiles near key facilities. It relied on S-300 and S-400 long-range surface-to-air missile batteries to defend major cities. But even with these defenses, Ukraine managed to hit oil depots, air bases, and ammunition warehouses across the border. Each strike reminded Russia that its heartland was not safe. The hospital became a target as Ukraine shifted strategy. Instead of just striking fuel depots or weapons factories, Ukraine began hitting places with symbolic and psychological impact. The goal was to break morale, not just destroy equipment. According to Ukrainian officials, the hospital treated many of Russia's elite airborne troops and special forces. Hitting it would not only hurt Russia, its ability to care for its wounded, but also send a message to its soldiers: no place is safe. Western support played a role too. The United States, United Kingdom, and other allies have been sharing intelligence with Ukraine. This intelligence includes satellite imagery, electronic intercepts, and radar tracking data. It is likely that Ukraine knew the exact layout of the hospital, the number of patients inside, and the times when it was most active. Coordinating a 300 drone strike requires precise planning. Every drone had to be launched at the right time, from the right location, and follow a carefully mapped route. This was not a random attack. It was a calculated move. Analysts believe Ukraine wanted to send a signal to Moscow just as Russia was preparing for a new offensive. Russian forces had been pushing in the east, near Donetsk, trying to take more territory before winter. Destroying the hospital would slow those efforts by reducing Russia's ability to treat its casualties and coordinate operations. The timing was also critical. The attack happened at night when Russian defenses are stretched thin and crews are tired. Nighttime drone strikes are harder to detect because drones fly low and use the cover of darkness to avoid radar. By launching hundreds at once, Ukraine forced Russia's air defenses to make hard choices, which targets to shoot and which to let through. Some drones were likely decoys, meant to draw fire and expose air defense positions. Others were armed with explosives, aiming for the hospital itself. In military terms, this was a higher-risk, higher-reward strike. If it failed, Ukraine would lose hundreds of drones and give Russia valuable intelligence about its tactics. But if it succeeded, it would deliver one of the most significant blows to Russian infrastructure since the start of the war. This is the setup for what happened next. a moment that would stun Russia and grab headlines across the world. It was a cold, still night when the operation began. The date was chosen carefully, a weekday, when the hospital was at peak capacity. At 2:13 a.m., the first wave of drones took off from multiple hidden sites across Ukraine. These were not small commercial drones. They were purpose-built, long-range kamikaze drones designed to fly hundreds of kilometers and carry explosive payloads. Each one had pre-programmed GPS coordinates locked in. Each one was part of a swarm. Russian radar operators first saw a handful of blips on their screens. At first, they assumed it was just another routine incursion. Small drone raids had become common over the past year. But then the number of targets multiplied. Dozens turned to hundreds. Operators scrambled to wake commanders. Alerts went out. Within minutes, air defense crews across the region were running to their posts. At 2:17 a.m., the first drones reached the outer perimeter of Russian air defenses. Panzer systems opened fire, launching missiles and spraying bursts of 30mm autocannon rounds into the night sky. Some drones went down, but the swarm kept coming. For every one shot down, 3 more appeared. Electronic warfare units activated jammers, trying to block the drone's GPS guidance. But many drones had backup navigation systems, including inertial navigation, that did not rely on GPS. They stayed on course. Some even changed routes mid-flight to avoid known air defense zones, a sign that they were either pre-programmed with detailed maps or guided by operators monitoring live feeds. By 2:20 a.m., the first explosions were heard near the outskirts of the hospital complex. These were likely decoys, drones loaded with smaller charges, detonating outside to distract defenses. The real strike came minutes later. At 2:23 a.m., multiple drones slammed into the hospital's main building. The explosions tore through the upper floors. Windows shattered. Fires broke out instantly. Moments later, more drones hit the auxiliary wings, the power station, and the underground storage facilities. Each impact sent plumes of fire and smoke into the sky. Russian emergency sirens blared as fire crews rushed to the scene. Soldiers and medical staff scrambled to evacuate patients. But the strikes continued. Wave after wave hit the complex, targeting any structure that was still standing. Satellite data later confirmed that over 30 separate impacts occurred in less than 10 minutes. The hospital complex was almost completely destroyed. Videos shared on Russian social media showed massive fireballs lighting up the night sky. Some footage captured secondary explosions, suggesting that ammunition or fuel stored in the facility was also hit. By 2:27 a.m., the attack began to slow. Most of the drones had either hit their targets or been shot down. The remaining few circled the area, striking surviving infrastructure or air defense units that revealed their positions by firing. Communications in the area went down shortly after. Analysts believe that some drones may have carried electronic warfare payloads designed to jam radios and disable local networks. This blackout added to the chaos as commanders struggled to coordinate rescue efforts. The scale of the attack shocked Russian officials. Within hours, state media acknowledged that a Ukrainian UAV strike had hit a medical facility, but downplayed the damage. Independent Russian bloggers, however, posted photos showing the hospital in ruins. Some claim that high-ranking officers were inside the hospital at the time and may have been killed. By dawn, the fires were still burning. Emergency crews worked through the morning to put out the flames and recover survivors from the rubble. Local residents reported hearing constant sirens and seeing ambulances rushing toward other towns, suggesting mass casualty evacuation. Ukraine remained tight-lipped about the strike at first. Only later did a senior Ukrainian official hint that this was a deliberate operation. He called it a message to the invader and said that those who plan war should not feel safe anywhere. The incident became one of the most talked-about events of the war. Analysts compared it to earlier high-profile strikes on Russian air bases and infrastructure, but noted that this was on a larger scale and with more strategic impact. The hospital, once a hub for Russia's war effort, was now a smoking crater. And this was just the beginning of the story. The real question was how it had been done and what made this attack so effective. The attack on Russia's largest military hospital was not a random act. It was the result of months of planning, engineering, and coordination. To understand how 300 drones overwhelmed one of the most protected facilities in Russia, we need to look at the technology and tactics behind the operation. Ukraine has been investing heavily in drone warfare since 2022. At first, it relied on small quadcopters for reconnaissance and short-range strikes. But as the war dragged on, Ukraine moved toward long-range systems. These included domestically produced kamikaze drones with ranges up to 800 kilometers. Some were modified versions of civilian aircraft. Others were completely new designs made for mass production. The advantage was cost. Single kamikaze drone might cost tens of thousands of dollars. Compare that to a Russian surface-to-air missile, which can cost millions. For every missile Russia fires, Ukraine spends a fraction of that cost to launch several more drones. The key to this attack was scale. Launching 300 drones is not just about having enough airframes. It requires coordination. Drone had to be given a flight path that avoided collisions with others. They had to approach the target from multiple directions to stretch Russian air defenses thin. Military analysts believe Ukraine used a swarm control system that allowed operators to monitor dozens of drones at once and make small adjustments in real time. The drones flew low, often under 100 meters, to stay below the radar horizon of Russian long-range systems like the S-400. Flying low also makes detection harder because ground clutter from buildings, trees, and terrain masks radar returns. By the time Russian defenses detected the swarm, it was already close. Another factor was electronic warfare. Russia has some of the most powerful jamming systems in the world. They can disrupt GPS signals, forcing drones off course. Ukraine adapted by using multiple navigation methods. Some drones used inertial navigation systems, which measure movement using gyroscopes and accelerometers. Others used terrain-following software that compared the ground below with stored maps. This meant that even if GPS was jammed, the drones could still hit their targets. Analysts also believe decoy drones played a big role. These were cheaper, stripped-down drones designed to do one thing: get shot at. When Russian air defenses fired on them, they revealed their positions. This allowed other drones to avoid those areas or strike the air defense systems directly. Some drones may have carried anti-radiation payloads, homing in on radar signals to destroy radar dishes. Russia's air defense network is layered. Long-range S-400 missiles cover hundreds of kilometers. Medium-range Buk and Tor systems protect specific regions. Short-range Pantsir systems guard individual sites, but even the best defense has limits. A saturation attack, where so many targets appear at once that defenders cannot shoot them all, is one of those limits. Every missile launch takes time. Every autocannon burst has to reload. When hundreds of drones attack together, some will get through. The warhead types also mattered. Some drones carried high explosive fragmentation charges designed to destroy buildings. Others carried incendiary payloads to start fires. By mixing payloads, Ukraine ensured that even partial hits caused chaos. Fires spread quickly and overwhelmed firefighting efforts. Explosions damaged power lines, communications gear, and fuel stores. This was not just a physical strike, but a psychological one. Hospitals are normally protected by the laws of war. Attacking one sends a clear message. Nowhere is safe if it serves the war effort. Ukrainian officials argued that the hospital was a legitimate military target because it treated active combat troops and hosted command meetings. For Russia, the strike was a shock. It showed that even well-defended facilities deep in its territory could be destroyed. Western intelligence likely played a major role. The US and NATO have satellites, spy planes, and electronic listening stations watching the region. They can track Russian air defense radars, map out coverage gaps, and give Ukraine the exact coordinates to exploit. By combining this intelligence with Ukraine's drones, the strike became a precision operation rather than a blind raid. In the end, the attack worked because it was more than just firepower. It was timing, planning, and technology coming together to hit a high-value target in the heart of Russian military infrastructure. It was a demonstration of how modern warfare is changing, where cheap drones can do the work once reserved for expensive missiles and bomber aircraft. The question now is how Russia would respond, and whether this single strike would change the course of the war. The morning after the strike, Russia woke up to a grim reality. Its largest military hospital was gone. The complex was reduced to rubble, still smoldering in some places. Emergency crews worked through the day to recover the wounded and clear debris. Russian authorities confirmed that dozens of medical staff were injured. Unofficial reports suggested that hundreds of soldiers, many of them recently evacuated from the front, were killed or critically wounded. The loss of the hospital was more than just a humanitarian tragedy. It was a strategic blow. This facility had been one of the main hubs for treating wounded troops from the Eastern Front. Without it, Russian logistics had to reroute patients to smaller, less equipped facilities farther away. That meant longer evacuation times, lower survival rates for seriously wounded soldiers, and more pressure on the medical chain. The psychological effect was immediate. Russian military bloggers who often report from the front lines expressed shock and anger. Some blamed the Ministry of Defense for failing to protect such a critical site. Others warned that morale among troops would collapse if they believed they could not be evacuated safely. The attack sent a message not just to Russian leadership, but also to every soldier in the trenches. Nowhere was beyond Ukraine's reach. Politically, the Kremlin faced a challenge. State media initially downplayed the strike, calling it a localized incident. But satellite images and videos shared online told a different story. The scale of the destruction was too large to hide. Within 24 hours, Russian officials vowed retaliation. Threats of missile strikes on Ukrainian cities followed. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced new measures to strengthen air defenses around hospitals, command centers, and supply depots. Internationally, the strike sparked debate. Some Western analysts praised Ukraine for a well-executed military operation. They argued that any facility supporting the war effort was a legitimate target under the laws of armed conflict. Others worried that attacking a hospital could set a dangerous precedent and escalate the conflict further. Humanitarian organizations expressed concern, calling for both sides to respect the Geneva Conventions. On the battlefield, the effects were soon felt. Reports emerged that Russian casualty evacuation times increased in the following weeks. Some units were forced to keep wounded soldiers near the front longer, waiting for transport. This slowed Russian offensives in several sectors. Analysts believe this was one of the goals of the strike, to disrupt operations during a critical phase of Russia's campaign. The destruction of the hospital was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new phase. Both sides were preparing their next moves, knowing that the rules of this war had just shifted again. The strike on Russia's largest military hospital will be remembered as a turning point in this war. It showed that Ukraine is no longer just defending its territory. It is taking the fight deep into Russian-held areas, using technology and precision to hit critical infrastructure. This is not just about drones or bombs. It is about a change in how wars are fought. For decades, large militaries relied on tanks, jets, and artillery to win battles. But this attack proved that hundreds of small, inexpensive drones can do what a squadron of bombers once did, and at a fraction of the cost. The age of mass drone warfare is here. This is a lesson not only for Russia, but for every modern army. NATO planners, U.S. military leaders, defense analysts are already studying this strike to prepare for future conflicts, where swarms of drones could decide battles. There is also an ethical question. Military hospitals are usually protected by international law. But when a hospital becomes a command center, it blurs the line between civilian and military target. Ukraine argues it was a legitimate strike. Russia calls it a war crime. This debate will not end soon. It raises questions about how future wars will treat dual-use facilities. The strike also carries a warning. Every escalation risks a response. Russia may answer with missile attacks on Ukrainian cities or attempt to cripple Ukraine's power grid again. Each step raises the risk of a wider conflict, drawing in NATO or other powers. That is why this single event matters beyond the battlefield. It affects diplomacy, global security,